Good afternoon. My name is Kerry, Romaine. I'm the VP Finance for the International Society for Performance Improvement Texas chapter. Thank you, everybody, for joining our webcast today. I think it's a pretty special one. It's something we haven't done before, at least in my short time here. I don't know if they've done anything prior to my arrival, but I think it's a pretty special discussion. We've got it's a little bit different for us, I will admit. We're kind of venturing out as an organization into some other areas. We have a panel of 4, I believe, today that I will introduce here in just a minute. But the topic is developmental disorders and the workplace. This is going to be there's many developmental disorders out there. This discussion is going to focus a lot around autism. We might get into some other areas, but for the most part, we're going to be talking about autism in the workplace. But I do believe there are quite a lot of parallels for some of the other developmental disorders that are out there, such as, Asperger's obviously is very, very similar. ADHD, ADD, some of these other developmental and neurodevelopmental disorders that we hear about basically every day now. So that's where we're at. So just there is I've said it to everybody offline, but there is a PowerPoint that I'll be walking through. It's if you're just on the phone, it's nothing that you can't do without. That you can't do without. It'll kind of help us guide the conversation, but other than that, it's purely an aid for me, really, if you want to know the truth. So I have up in front of us now the agenda. So the first 10-15 minutes, I'm going to kind of give my testimonial here of how I came to how this discussion with ISPI came to be and why we're doing this today. And then we'll have a lengthy panel discussion that I'll moderate, and I will go ahead and introduce my panelists. The first panelist we have is Dr. Demetria Ennis-Cole. She's a professor in the Department of Learning Technologies at the University of North Texas. She has degrees in computer science and curriculum and instruction, emphasis in computer education. She worked in the industry as a programmer for International Business Machines, IBM, and she was a computer analyst at Louisiana State University before accepting a faculty position with the University of North Texas. She is a member of several state, national, and international organizations, including the Association for Supervision and Curriculum Development and the International Society for Technology and Education. Dr. Ennis-Cole has spent the last 8 years as the director of the Technology and Applied Research and Autism Laboratory, or TARA, where she studies the technology using behaviors of children with autism spectrum disorder. And you can go to the website there. It's tara.unt.edu. Her work has helped her understand her 18-year-old son, who was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder at the age of 4, and we will talk more about that here in just a minute. Welcome, Dr. Ennis-Cole.
Thank you very much for having me.
My next panelist is Dr. Tyler Wood, also a professor of learning technologies at UNT in the Department of Learning Technologies. She received her PhD in special education from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. While at North Carolina, Dr. Tyler Wood worked with the Frank Porter Graham Child Development Center, researching strategies to work with at-risk children and their families. She serves as an advocate for 3 adults with disabilities who reside in group home environments. She maintains an active assessment practice that focuses on twice exceptional and their families. Currently, she's a professor and department chair in learning technologies at the University of North Texas. Her current research focuses on assistive technology and adapting curriculum for students with special needs. Welcome, Dr. Tyler Wood. My third panelist is Dr. Susan Nichols, who I have not heard join. Susan, are you out there? Okay, I'll go ahead and introduce her. She may join. If not, we'll be able to move on. Dr. Susan Nichols has spent over 15 years of her professional life in the field of autism intervention. She has worked with as a special education teacher and interventionist in local school districts. Dr. Nichols is a board-certified behavior analyst and has served children with autism in both the home and center-based programs. She received her bachelor's degree in psychology from Texas Women's University and her master's and PhD from UNT in the area of special education and autism intervention. She's a member of several professional organizations and has taught a variety of undergraduate and graduate courses in the Department of Special Education at UNT. She currently serves as Associate Executive Director of the UNT Kristen Farmer Autism Center. Welcome, Dr. Nichols. Jessica, can you see you have audio now?
Yeah, everything's working perfectly. Thanks for having me on.
So I'm just going through introducing my panelists. I was going to give you the chance to introduce yourself and also talk about your business. So if you wouldn't mind giving us a quick bio and give us a quick rundown of what Hope Education Services does.
Absolutely. Thank you for that opportunity. My name is Jessica Leichtweisz, and I've been working with children with autism for more than 10 years. I'm classically trained as in ABA as a behavior analyst, and I've been doing that ever since I graduated college. I absolutely love it. So the story of me starting my company, Hope Education Services, in the field of autism, one of the reasons why I originally got into the field is there was such a need for teachers, and there was such a need for people to work and help with the children, and there was such a demand for services. So when I got out of college, I started working with kids, and about 3 years ago, I became really acutely aware of just how much more autism was increasing, and that gap was getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And as an ABA therapist working one-on-one with children, there was very little I could do to help that gap, right? I could work 40 hours a week, 50 hours a week, but that was it. That's all I could do. So I started Hope Education Services to be the answer and really to disrupt the field of autism, the field of ABA, and bring a platform where parents could learn how to do ABA for themselves, by themselves, and really help their children. I also became very keenly aware that it's really only people living in major cities, and only in some countries, in the US and in Canada, there's major cities where people live that they can get access to services and access to help. But unfortunately, the majority of people around the world or parents around the world who have a child diagnosed with autism, they don't have anyone helping them. And even if you live an hour from a major city, a lot of times no one's going to come to your house and no one's going to provide services for you just because of the travel and the logistics. So I decided to really create a platform where parents can come, parents can learn. And it's my mission, it's my vision to bring ABA and teach parents how to do it, to make it really simple. So that way, when parents are waiting to get services, they're waiting to get help, they're waiting to get that diagnosis, they can start helping their children right away. And they can relate to their children on a much deeper level. So that is the vision of my country. One of the core principles of my company is that every child has greatness inside them, and I really want to help them to see their potential and live into their fullest potential.
Thanks, Jessica. And I got to tell you, I'm very happy to have Jessica on board along with my other panelists. Jessica, she and I kind of met in a strange way a few weeks ago. I kind of reached out to her on LinkedIn, and I'm proud to say I've made a friend ever since then. We did a podcast together on my new book that I'll talk about here shortly. So thanks to all my panelists that agreed to come on with me today. So let's jump right in. There we go. So the biggest question: why is ISPI-Texas doing? Why are we having this webinar? Why are we talking about developmental disorders? October is Disability Employment Awareness Month, so we specifically targeted this month and said, we're going to do something here to talk about Disability Awareness Month. Like I said, we kind of zeroed in on autism because we do have quite a lot of people with a lot of expertise and personal accounts with autism. And here's I don't know if you would consider this a scary statistic or just general reality, but the last numbers from the CDC are 1 in 59 children are diagnosed on the autism spectrum, and that's up from about 1 in 64. So that number's on the rise. We're going to continue to see that number on the rise for probably the next decade, if I had my guess. It's something that's getting more awareness. When you get more awareness, you get more diagnoses, and that's just a fact that there's no other. I don't pretend to be a medical professional by any stretch of the imagination, but when you start to have more awareness around a particular medical condition or neurodevelopmental condition, you tend to get more people that notice some of the tendencies and the symptoms belonging to that specific disorder. So ISPI-Texas got involved in this because we all work in ISPI-Texas. We are a performance improvement training and development organization, we do everything we can to promote, basically promote productivity in the work environment and in the workforce. And we're all doing this to better our lives for our families. So I go to work every single day thinking about how can I do something today to better my family's life. I come to work to make money, to make my family's life better. I seek promotion opportunities to give my family a better life. All that given said, why not think of the next generation? How are they going to do that for their families? For me personally, which I'll get into my story here in just a minute, it's about how can I make not only my life better and my kids' life better, but my grandkids' life better. And that goes to productivity. So why not think of the next generation? And then the last one is productivity, and I capitalize that specifically. We are all about productivity here at ISPI-Texas Training and Development. We want to bring out the best in every single employee, every single worker in the business environment today. And that includes people with developmental disorders. That number 1 in 59 means that over the next couple of decades, the next decade, we are going to start seeing more and more people on the autism spectrum joining the workforce and looking for ways to be productive. In prior generations, prior decades, a lot of these people were, I don't think I'm being hyperbolic when I say a lot of them were forgotten. They certainly weren't nurtured as well as we do now. So this is all about how do we find a way for somebody on the autism spectrum or with a developmental disorder to be productive, to have a productive life, and to be productive for their company, for their organization, or if they start a business. I've seen I highly recommend everybody go to a website, just a Google John's Crazy Socks. Is a gentleman out of, I believe, in New York that has a business he started. It's actually a multi-million-dollar business now, selling socks, and they just have all these crazy socks. Well, John has Down syndrome, and so he's really started this business. He's running this business with the help of his father, and it's just a really neat thing he's done, and a really awesome story to see. So I highly recommend you go see it. And it's things like that we at ISPI-Texas are striving to help people with, and I think this is a good start here. So why am I talking to you about this? I do not. So I just introduce you to 4 people that have a whole lot more qualifications in this area than I do. They've all got PhD behind their name, or they own a business, or they have decades of experience in this area. What is my qualification? Here he is. So that's my son. It was March 17th, 2017. I was sitting in the office of a local school district here where he goes, and they informed us after a lengthy assessment phase that he did indeed have autism spectrum disorder. He was on the spectrum. I will tell you that was a bit of a low time for me specifically, and for my family. That's not something that comes very easy. One minute you're a parent, the next minute you're the parent of a special needs child. So my son has always, what originally kind of cued us into the fact that we might have some issues is fact his speech was very delayed. He still to this day, he's 6.5 now, he still to this day does not communicate very well. He can talk. If you ask him to say a word, it comes out clear as a bell. He can say any word basically that you ask him to say, but there's no reciprocal conversation, and that's something that a lot of people, especially children on the spectrum, struggle with, is reciprocal conversation and social interactions. My son does not understand if you're in a restaurant, you may or may not want him coming in, sitting at your table and eating out of your plate. He just doesn't quite get the social norms that our society has decided on. He also experiences kind of some fixations here and there. I'll give you an example. The other night, I was getting home late from work, and my wife was putting him to bed. Well, he wasn't having it. He had to have both of us come put him to bed, and he really fixated on it. He eventually fell asleep, and the first thing he did when he got up the next morning is ask where I was. So we've had times where we've had to prepare him for an event better than a week in advance. because it was something out of his norm. He also experienced, I've always referred to, so if you're out in public and you see a child acting up, I think you would be able to tell the difference with a child with autism spectrum disorder. I call them meltdowns. There is literally nothing you can do to get them to quit, to get them, I mean, your best bet is to get them calmed down. That's the reason I refer to them as a meltdown. You have to get them calmed down before you can ascertain why their behavior is what it is. It's much different than most other children that may be acting up in public, and this is something we had to really get used to as a family. So that's my qualification. My son, again, was in kind of a dark place for a little while and decided, you know what, I'm going to do something about that. I can either sit around and sulk, or I can try to make his and my life better by getting the word out, and two, finding some ways to cope with this, and one day try to make him a successful and happy member of society. How did I do that? So you see the picture in front of you here. This is a picture we took a couple of years ago. These were our Christmas pictures. We really liked this picture. After the diagnosis, I sat down and started writing about it. Writing has always been something that's very cathartic to me, and so anytime something takes an emotional toll on me, I sit down and started writing about it. So I took this picture and my writing, and here's the shameless disclaimer. So everybody can see there's a shameless plug forthcoming. So I sat down and started writing what eventually became my first book. It's called Totally Lost, a brutally honest assessment of raising a child on the autism spectrum. You'll notice the picture there is very similar because that is the picture I took and adapted to be the cover of my book. This book, and the reason I'm showing it to you here today, was created to it was created to help people like me that in that moment, whenever they receive diagnosis or if they suspect their child might be on the spectrum, that they know that somebody has been what they've been through and come out better on the other side. I started looking around for things after we got diagnosed, and there was a lot of stuff out there about, you know, the clinical definitions and PhDs and things along those lines that were all very useful down the line for me. But in that moment, I wanted to read something. I wanted to hear somebody's story that they had been through this and come out better on the other side. So that's where my book comes from. And here's the shameless plug for you. It is available on Barnes & Noble and Amazon. So there's my shameless plug for the day. So our experience with this and the reason that I wrote my book led to this question, which I struggle with daily, and so do a lot of other parents with their children, because we really don't know what adulthood will look like for my son. I really don't know. He's highly talented in certain areas. He has a very structured mindset. Puzzles go together at lightning speed. He's got incredibly, almost unnaturally good balance. But as far as what can he do later on in life, we're probably a decade away from being able to answer that question. And that's a really terrifying place to be, if I'm being perfectly honest. So let me pose this question to you rhetorically. What can we do as performance improvement professionals to help people with developmental disorders become happy, successful, and productive employees and productive people? So that's the question we're trying to find the answer to here in this webinar, or at least try to shine some light on here in this webinar. So I'm going to go ahead and move to my panel right now. First question up, I'm going to propose to Dr. Ennis Cole. You also have a child on the spectrum. Can you kind of give us a rundown of your experiences, kind of some of the issues facing your child, and just give us kind of a quick rundown?
Yes, I will. Some of the issues that are facing my son, he'll be 19 on Sunday, but he still has issues with social acceptability, emotional understanding, employment, and motivation to continue his education. Going back to the social acceptability, He does have some self-stimulatory behaviors. He has what we call an excited dance, where he will make noises and move around. Those are not often accepted well by others around him. He also has akathisia, a movement kind of disorder, which is a byproduct of some of the medication he's had to take. He has a slower processing speed, so it takes him a while to understand what someone actually wants of him and for him to respond. And so these are the kinds of things that people don't always understand and they don't respond well to. And these can also cause him some social isolation. In terms of emotional understanding, he has an associative mind. So he's paired up serious faces with that being a frightening experience. Someone who is very serious and strict and stern could be just very direct or very focused. And so we're going to have to do some retraining to kind of see if we can break that association so that he's not afraid of serious faces. But emotional understanding is that's all a part of that emotional life that he has there. Under employment, we have him doing a little volunteer job right now, and he has the possibility of working a few hours a week. But underemployment and unemployment are a real problem that he will face if we don't get him motivated to go back to school. Typically, the jobs that he's qualified now, since he's finished high school, would be a janitor or a greeter. And those typically are making like $9 or $10 an hour for a few hours a week. So financial independence is an extreme issue, and he won't be able to be financially independent if we can't raise the bar and help him find something where he can work more hours and with better pay, which leads me to the motivation to continue school. Kindergarten through 12th grade, where it's exceptionally difficult for us. And we placed him in a private therapeutic school because he was not able to do public school. It was just a problem. The private therapeutic school also was very challenging, and he's experienced a series of burnout, and he's not interested in school anymore. So we're trying to convince him now that for financial independence and better opportunities, he's got to go to school again and get some sort of associate's degree or some certificate program or something. So those are some of the challenges that we're facing right now.
Thank you for sharing. I will tell you the school is an issue. Schooling is an issue from the time that you find out until, you know, in perpetuity. Because my son, when we first put him in, he goes to, or was going to, Crum ISD. He's now a patient at the UNT Kristen Farmer Autism Center. Things like circle time, you know, whenever the kids circle up and they have to do certain activities, he just did not have the attention span or the want to sit around in a circle and listen to other kids and look and be patient. And he just doesn't understand that it became the place where he would roll across and do somersaults and everything, and they would have to remove him from that situation for various reasons. I will tell you, one of the things that's very difficult for me, I graduated high school from very small school out in West Texas. I went immediately, got a bachelor's degree. I have a master's degree. I'm working on my PhD in the UNT Department of Learning Technologies right now. I've got a great job down here at UNT System. I've written 2 books now. The other one should be out soon. I've already got one out in the market for sale. You know, all that to say, life has come relatively easy to me. You can tell I don't have issues communicating. People genuinely have always liked to hear me talk and kind of gravitated toward me. And these are all the things I'm good at, all the strengths I have myself always struggle with. And that's a difficult place to be for a lot of parents. School is not a drop them off and you know, ask them how their day went at the end of the day. First of all, my son can't even tell me how his day went. He doesn't understand the question. He just says yes to it. It's a much more involved process when you start with the autism and entering that in there. And then there's the social aspect of it that is just they just quite often just don't understand. Like I said, my son does not understand that the guy in Sam's that's about to bite into his hot dog does not want you to come up and give him a hug behind his neck because you think he's your paw. And that's exactly what happened. And then a guy kind of turned to look around like, what's going on here? But my son thought it was just perfectly acceptable. So, and we can try to explain it to him, but it's really years of repetition that you get, no, you can't do this. This isn't acceptable. So schools is is an issue for all of these kids, all of these people that are on the spectrum. I'll bring up a question up here on the screen. Dr. Nichols, are you out there yet? Dr. Nichols? Okay, well, Jessica, if you don't mind, I'd like to turn this question kind of over to you, and we can have just kind of a little dialogue about we've talked a lot about what Dr. Ennis Cole's son and my son experience. Do you have a kind of a general description of what autism spectrum disorder is, and kind of what they can face that you've beyond what you've heard from our personal experiences?
Yeah, I'm happy to help with that. So one of the things that I have noticed, and one of the things that's really apparent, when I first started working in the field of autism until today, the definition of autism has changed, and it's changed rather significantly. So I just want to go into a brief history, Kerry, if that's okay, about, and really take parents through where autism started and where it is now. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, autism was really first discovered in the late 60s, early 70s. And at that time, they had said that autism, they had said it was a mental retardation. And they said it was caused by refrigerator moms who didn't love their children. And the official treatment for autism was called a parentectomy. And they would literally remove kids from their homes, and they would put them in institutions. And the idea was that that problem would go away because they were no longer with their evil mothers. So fortunately, that is not the case today. And a lot more is known about autism. When I first started in the field of autism under the DSM-4, and I'm bringing this up because a lot of the people listening to this, if they have adults with autism or they have teens with autism, their children would have been diagnosed under the DSM-4. So the DSM-4 stands for the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of the APA, the American Psychological Association. And under the DSM-4, there were 5 types of autism. Autism spectrum disorder, right, is what it was known as. So the reason people ask was, why was it a spectrum? Because there was considered 5 types of autism. So the first type of autism would be classic autism, what autism is. That was known as autistic disorder. Now, kids that were diagnosed with autistic disorder, they had issues with communication, issues with socialization, and they had those stereotypical behaviors that you're talking about, those stimming behaviors, whether it's hand flapping, making repetitive body movements, fixation on one object, looking at things from the corner of the eye, making sounds, scripting language. Those are all examples of what stereotypy would have been. So the second example was Asperger Syndrome. Now, Asperger Syndrome, someone with Asperger Syndrome, they did not have issues in communication, meaning they could talk, they could point at things, they would use gestures, they can get their needs met, but they were socially awkward. They typically also have a higher IQ than the average person, so they would have some really strong academic skills. Then the other thing that was considered autism was Rett syndrome. So Rett syndrome now is a separate condition. Now they have found the genetic component to that, and they have put it out of the field of autism. And the same thing for the fourth one, which was childhood integrative disorder. And that also they found the one gene that causes that. So now Rett syndrome and childhood disintegrative disorder, they're their own separate classifications. And then there was this umbrella diagnosis. And this is the fifth one. This is the most common diagnosis that children had under the DSM-4. And that's called pervasive developmental disorder, not otherwise specified. So essentially what that meant is that a child presented with some of the signs of autism, but according to the DSM-4, not enough to be considered autistic disorder. So that is really where a lot of children were classified. And under the DSM-4, the great thing about it is that a lot of kids who maybe didn't have classical autism, but still were on the spectrum, and really by classical autism, really meaning more severe autism, they were still able to get that diagnosis, which opened up services. And Kerry, as you said, it also, the more awareness, once that became an option, more kids wound up being diagnosed with the DSM-4. So I'm going to I talked about that because, like I said, you're a parent, on this call and you have a teen with autism, chances are they were diagnosed under the DSM-4. So in 2013, it changed to be the DSM-5. They updated it, came with the latest manual. So now there's actually one diagnosis of autism, and it's changed a little bit. It's called autism spectrum disorder today, and it has levels 1, level 2, and level 3. So there's 3 things that all children who fall under any of these categories have in common, and that's they present issues in communication. And by communication, we don't mean just talking. It's the ability to actually make your needs met. So that includes using gestures, pointing to things, responding to gestures. If someone sticks their hand out, typically you would know that they want something, or they touch their chest, we know that they would want something. So kids with autism, they might take your hand and they might bring you to what they want, because that's a means of getting it, but they aren't really doing any sort of communication. They're not pointing things out. They typically do not have another big thing with communication, joint attention. So if you look at an average toddler or 3-year-old or 4-year-old and they see an airplane flying ahead and it's making sounds, they might point to it and look. So that's initiating joint attention. So children with autism, they typically do not do that. So they have those issues with communication. There's also, Kerry, as you said, the issues with socialization. So children have issues. They don't understand or know that there's social norms. They don't understand basically how to interact with other people in social situations, maybe not making eye contact, not being able to understand perspective taking, that other people have a difference of opinion. They might like different things. So for example, if a child with autism really, really loves Pokemon or Power Rangers or the monkey, then everybody loves that, right? So they don't understand that. Or even in a more, even for example, like if you are at work, Kerry, your son may not understand. If he says, does daddy know what I'm eating? Well, yes, of course daddy knows what he's eating. But if you're at work, obviously you may not be seeing it. You don't know what he's eating, but he may not have that perspective. So that's a little bit under the social skills. The third one is the stereotypy. So those are the stereotypical behaviors. Now you talked about meltdowns. One of the biggest things the DSM-5 did for the first time in the field of autism, recognize sensory behaviors as being a component of autism. So now it's actually part of the diagnosis that children with autism, they have issues with sensory integration, meaning they either seek out sensory stimulus or they avoid sensory stimulus. They look very similar, and you really need a very highly skilled and trained professional to often know which is which. But an example would be where children, they don't like getting their hands dirty, or they love getting their hands dirty, or they don't like to be touched, or they are constantly touching other people. I have children I work with where if I touch them, they pull away almost as if I'm hurting them. And then I have children that I work with that are constantly playing with my ear. Right, so there's a sensory component now also to the field of autism. So those are really the 3 main things that all children with autism have in common. And like I said, now there are 3 levels of autism. So the first level of autism would be autism level 1. That's a person who will go through life and have noticeable features of autism, but be able to be independent with very little to no support. They will be able to get jobs, they'll be able to have families, they'll be able to work in a very meaningful way. Now, children can also change from level 3, level 2, level 1 over time. So that's the goal for every parent to get children to that point. And then there's the autism level 2. So autism level 2, somebody will need some more supports, they'll need more moderate supports. They typically have more stimming behaviors, they typically have a lot more issues with socialization, but they can communicate. So children with levels 1 and 2, or adults with level 1 or 2 autism, they can use language to communicate, or an alternative like text or pro very proficiently. So level 3 autism is considered to be more severe autism. These are people who will need more intensive support really the rest of their life. And fortunately, because more and more services are becoming available, we're seeing a trend of people moving away from that level 3 autism, and even if they're diagnosed with that. Typically, when they're diagnosed with that at a young level, they're not able to have language or really a way to communicate. And fortunately, that winds up changing over time. So it's a little bit less common to really see that and see that sustained over time. That would have been the classic autistic disorder and the DSM-4 that some people might be on your other child might be diagnosed with. And whereas the level 1 would be really what was considered Asperger Syndrome. So we're at high functioning autism versus low functioning autism. So they also have some qualifiers. So the qualifiers with ADHD. So we know that a lot of times ADHD and autism, they go hand in hand, that a lot of children with autism are extremely hyper. And that's not necessarily part of the diagnosis, but it's a qualifier. So a child can be diagnosed with either level 1, 2, or 3 with ADHD. And then developmental delay or intellectual disability is what it's currently called. That would be a child who has more low IQ and has a difficult time learning. And again, a child can be diagnosed with either level 1 or 2. I mean, if he's level 3 or 2, it's not typical you see that with a level 1, but that's also a qualifier. So it's not part of the, part of the diagnosis, meaning that everybody who is diagnosed with autism will have either one of those things, but it's common enough that it's part of the option of a pediatrician could add in when there is a diagnosis. So that's where the current, and as you can see, we've obviously come a really long way. I mean, there was a lot I left out in between in the history of autism, but we've come from really blaming parents to now being able to do highly, level genetic research and hopefully having some more answers in the next, 5 to 10 years on what is even really causing autism. And really, as they find out more about it, being able to really hone in on a definition and make sure that every child is really getting the appropriate diagnosis so they can get the appropriate help.
That's a great segue into the next question again for you, Jessica. Is if somebody's listening today and they suspect their child has autism, real quickly, what's your best advice? What should they do? How should? Because I will tell you, this was a difficult process for us to get diagnosed. So real quickly, what's your best advice on what somebody should do if they suspect this?
The best advice I can give to parents is to never wait and to be your child's advocate. One of the things that I find a lot of parents make as a mistake is to wait, especially if your child is younger. Everyone might tell you, your parents might tell you, your uncles, your brothers, your sisters, your friends, sometimes even your pediatrician, oh, well, boys just learn slower than girls, children talk at different rates, I didn't talk till I was 4, and look at me, I'm fine. And a lot of times parents wait to wind up getting help. The sooner a child starts intervention, the better off they're going to do. That's always the case. So it's always a good idea to start early. The other thing is that oftentimes now where I live, I can look out my window right now and at nighttime at least I can see the skyline of New York City. So I live in a very developed area. Here there's a 9 to 12 month waiting list typically to see a developmental pediatrician who's one of 2 people who can actually diagnose autism, and I'll go through that in a little bit. So you always want to make an appointment immediately. Even if your pediatrician is giving you a difficult time, you really have to fight them for a referral to see a developmental pediatrician or a pediatric neurologist. Those are the 2 people who can diagnose autism. If you're going to wait 6 months, 12 months, you want to make sure that you have that appointment. That way, if things don't go as planned, your child doesn't just start talking in 6 months or 12 months, you don't have to wait another 6 or 12 months and then delay getting services. So it's really, really important that you fight for getting an evaluation. You fight right away. I mean, do it right away. Don't listen to anyone telling you not to. There's a few things you can do if you think your child has autism or you're not really sure. Maybe you're hearing this is kind of a buzzword, and maybe you're concerned because your child's cousin or a friend of yours has autism and you're seeing some signs. There's a test called the MCHAT, M-C-H-A-T. I'll actually put it into the chat right now so you can see it in there if you're on here live. I'm not sure if that's an option in the recording. If you just Google that, that's actually a assessment that's designed for parents where you can answer some very easy questions, and it's very short. You can do it about 10, 15 minutes, and they will tell you whether or not your child is at risk for having autism. And that is a really good way for, if as a parent you're really sure, to take a look at that and to really have an idea of, okay, do I really need to go and make an issue of this, or should I wait? The other final piece of advice I want to tell you, now, if you're in the U.S., listen to this call, and I'm assuming most people will be because this is obviously based in Texas. Here, if you want an early intervention or you want to get a school evaluation, you are not required to have a referral from a teacher. You're not required to have a referral from a pediatrician. If as a parent you think that your child needs support, you can contact either your Department of Health for your county and request an early intervention evaluation if they're under the age of 3, or you can contact the school district and you can ask them to assess your child. By law, they have to assess your child. And if they wound up having a delay, whether it's autism or not, they must provide intervention to help your child actually catch up to their peers. So that's something that you need doubt at all. And even if you don't think it's autism, even if you're just listening to this and your child doesn't seem to be at the same level as the other kids at the playground, certainly make that phone call, because you can get your child help. And whether or not there's a cost, it does vary from state to state, but typically, or in all states, is free for all parents, for all children. So definitely getting your child that help right away is some of the best advice I can give, and really being the advocate, making sure if you think there's an issue, do not listen to anyone else who tells you otherwise. Make sure you do something about it.
Yeah, I'm a personal example of that. It took us 2 years to get diagnosed. My wife and I both knew something was going on. My wife liked to say, and she still says it today, about our son that he has quirks. A lot of the things we've talked about, the stimming, the arm flapping, he babbles a lot all the time. There's also some really funny things he does, like night before last, he was eating we had made some frozen taquitos for him, and he referred to them as a taco stick. So he does some really funny things like that. But yeah, if nobody knows your child like you do. So don't think that just because there's a doctor standing in front of you telling you no, and if you believe something, you keep asking and keep going until you are satisfied. I will tell you I've made a lot of mistakes personally in this, and talk about a lot of them in my book. But if there's one thing that I did right, it was just not accepting, hey, this guy's a doctor, or this lady's a doctor, or she's a speech therapist, or whatever the case may be. They must be right. I don't know what I'm talking about. The fact of the matter is, they didn't know my son the way I did, and we kept pushing. So let me change directions a little bit here. I'd like to bring in Dr. Ennis and Dr. Tyler Wood. This is kind of a joint question here that I'll pose to the two of you. So you're both scholars in this workforce learning and education, training and development area, and you're also deeply involved in autism research. Can you kind of share how these two worlds, which look like, on the surface that they may be really far apart, they're actually pretty connected and are going to keep becoming more connected over the next few years. So let's start, Dr. Tyler Wood, if you want to jump in here first.
Sure. Currently, I'm working on a National Science Foundation grant that actually is putting historically relevant inventions in schools for train children in new technology, 21st century technology, where we know a large percent of our jobs will go. And so we do this with the general population, with general 7th graders, but really, and we're doing a good job. We're providing these skills, and students are going to have an opportunity to have jobs in the future. But we do, when we have these large programs, we really need to focus on students with disabilities. And we need to always be aware that sometimes, and most of the time, it takes them much longer to learn skills, and that they will probably be in school quite a bit longer. Most districts allow individuals with developmental disabilities, with autism, to remain in school until they're over 21. And we need to make the most opportunistic time available for our students to learn skills that will prepare them for the future. And as an advocate for individuals with disabilities, and as a parent advocate, I really believe that it's we need to be aware that sometimes public policies can almost work against our children or our students or our concerns getting that job for the future and achieving some degree of independence. So, early on in an individual with autism's life, or anybody with a developmental disability, we need to have a talk, and it is early on with parents, and say, hey, we need to start thinking about launching, and about jobs, and about the future. and about what will happen when your child maybe outlives you. And those are, wow, they are difficult. They are difficult conversations to have with parents. And we need to start preparing from the day we come up with a diagnosis, and say, you know, what are the potential, and we don't want to ever limit anybody, but clearly participating in some curriculum where you can't succeed and it has absolutely no possibility of ever getting you that golden job, that earmark of independence. We don't want to waste our time on curriculum that's not going to be profitable for the student. We don't want to maybe learn all the capitals of Europe when it would be better to learn how to navigate our city with a map and a bus schedule. So critical decisions have to be made as far as curriculum goes. With my National Science Foundation grant, you know, we've been using an inclusion model, and quite honestly, we found out that part of the curriculum that we're teaching here is it not being picked up by students with mild or moderate disabilities, and it may be a waste of time. And that says something to our inclusion model. Maybe with this particular curriculum that the general population is learning, we need to make some major modifications and to always have an eye and an ear towards the future for our students. Because, you know, they will only be children for a certain period of time. And I think Dr. Ennis Cole is at kind of the launching stage with her son, and is facing some dilemmas that I'm the mother of 6 children, and I face the same dilemma with specifically one of my sons. What will the future hold? How can we prepare? And we can't wait till someone is 21, 13, or even 6 to start making those critical decisions. And we need to be an interactive part with the school as we help the school determine what our child will actually learn. And I guess on that note, I'll pass it to Dr. Ennis Cole, who's going through, I guess, an early adult stage with her son.
Thank you, Dr. Tyler Wood. I hope to do as well with my son as you have done with yours. I really believe that workforce learning and education are very much connected. They may seem as if they are very different kinds of things, but it's the education that runs through each and ties them tightly in a thread. I think persons with ASD really need education so that they are able to understand the workplace environment, the appropriate behaviors that are necessary, and they're able to be their own advocate. They can self-advocate. They need to know people skills and how to deal with those soft skills that are not always very clear and transparent to them. They need to be employed about the possibilities for employment, as well as they need to know their own skill set. Often it's said that these individuals have splintered skills, but their abilities and interests, they need to know that so that they can be strong advocates for themselves. So education for individuals with ASD, and then we need to move to education for prospective employees. They really need to know that individuals with ASD have value. And of course, they have some quirks sometimes, but at the same time, some of them have miraculous skill sets. They can deal with repetitive tasks that we would get tired of very easily. They have amazing attention to detail. Some of them have a hyper focus to where, you know, they can really zero in on something and find distinct patterns that we miss. They're very good at pattern matching. Routines, they're exceptionally good at following routines. They can be very loyal employees. Several of them are very mathematical and artistic. So there are a number of different skill sets that they bring to the table, and prospective employees need to know this. And so employers need to know this. Employees who will work with these individuals need to know that they have this type of value. And the employees also need to know that they have to be a little bit more tolerant and patient with these individuals, that they should accept them and then assist them where necessary. So I really think that education is critical to making the whole situation better, and it ties workforce learning together in a very unique way.
Sorry, I was talking on mute there for a second, and so yeah, I just from what we have experienced so far with our experience with our son, all these things are going to come into such play, or especially if you have a child on the spectrum and you're listening here, or you suspect it, just like Jessica said, don't wait, do what you have to do, and then there's this next intersection of, okay, great, we've gotten them the help they need now, whatever therapies maybe now we've gotten a diagnosis, but what does this look like? What jobs can they be good at? And I will tell my son, like I said, he's very good at puzzles. He has a great he loves to read. He loves to ABCs and counting. That all came very easily to him. But it's putting it together and realizing that I have to come up with a message or come up with something I can communicate to other people that has been the issue with my son. So real quickly, I want to be cognizant of people's time and give people a few minutes for questions if they have them. So I want to turn this last question to Dr. Tyler Wood. So we have people that are going to be coming up. I know one of our former CFOs here in the UNT system, his son was diagnosed on the spectrum late in his teens. He didn't have a lot of the things that we're going to, a lot of the therapies and things that my son is going to get. And so he went to college. Son went to college. He's currently a student at UNT, living in the dorm. So that's a real success story. What are some things that companies and managers and just we in general, even their coworkers can do to help people on the spectrum with the stresses of daily life in the workplace and help them be successful in the workplace? Can you give us just a couple of minutes on this question?
Sure. I think that we need to stop thinking about the individuals on the autism spectrum disorder ceasing to need assistance from society when they turn 21. We really need a comprehensive national plan to follow individuals throughout their life, because job training will change. You know, the average American now has 6 jobs, and quite honestly, individuals on the spectrum will have many more than that. And technology is changing our workforce, and it's more difficult for our population with disabilities to keep up with technology. So nationwide, we need to all be advocates for a systemic change that provides training and job opportunities specific to those that are on the spectrum for their entire life. And, you know, we need to be aware that even in retirement, their retirement might look a bit different than everyone else's. They may still need some supports, and those supports might be quite unique to the individual. I think that in the United States, one of the things that's bothersome to me as a professional that deals with young adults and with adults on the spectrum is that we really kind of put the burden of lifelong support more or less back on the family. You know, and that is not necessarily the way some countries in Europe view individuals with disabilities. You know, they're more community oriented. They're more understanding that every individual maybe in the community needs to be happy and helped to reach their maximum potential, so that society as a whole is better. And we really haven't done that. And I think that puts an unfortunate burden on parents, because they sometimes feel that they are the only lifeline to keep their young person or their adult person that's on the spectrum engaged in an active employment and in a worthwhile existence. And it becomes critical as the person ages and as the family ages to make sure that supports are there. I don't think we have a good and adequate system to provide that support for everyone, and it's something that we certainly do need. But meanwhile, parents can do a lot. They can specify people that would be good caregivers or advocates for their young people or their adult children, and make that well known in a will, and do some financial planning. There are actually people that are out there now that can help you come up with a lifelong plan to help sustain your child with special needs, and that's reassuring. And I think the majority of my children were launched and went off when they were 18. And one of my children didn't necessarily get launched at 18 and is still probably not completely launched. But one of the things that I've seen is that I'm the advocate for 3 individuals that are in group homes, and they're older adults. They have the right to have their own life away from their parent. And my son has the right to have his own life away from me. And wow, was that a difficult thing for me to handle. Because now he's married and has a child, and he's very high functioning Asperger, but he's doing well, and it's okay. But it wasn't okay for a while because I was very used to being the person that made everything better. And he's launched, and I have to step back a bit. But I also, as a responsible parent, have to make sure that those supports are there for life for him, and even if I'm away, and that they're not interfering with his well-being and with his ability to make a life for himself, but they are there and he knows they're there and he needs them. And I think we're beginning to identify organizations and agencies and all kinds of opportunities for individuals with disabilities, whether they be group home environments, home helpers within the community, someone to come in to make sure that bills are paid, and that that we have adequate care for any offspring, and people to maybe counsel folks like me that when a baby does come on the scene, they're not over there 24/7. They can assume the role as grandma, as opposed to the role of I'm responsible for 3 people now as opposed to 1. And it's been a difficult road for me, but it's a worthwhile one. And I think overall my son is happy, and he's making his own way now, and he's taking very good care of my grandson, who, by the way, is not on the spectrum, and that's been an interesting kind of situation. So I will probably stop here because I could go on. And I have pictures of my grandson, which I could share with you, but I won't do that.
So now you bring up an interesting point, because I will tell you, I do a lot of trainings and things for higher education finance, also my PhD. Talking about my son is something that comes. I don't need a script for it. I don't need a PowerPoint for it. It's just something that comes naturally to me because it's the most personal thing to me. So I completely understand. Want to be cognizant of everybody's time. We're just a couple of minutes past 1 o'clock Central Time here, so I want to open it up real quick to the audience. If you have any questions, comments for our panel, and critiques for your beloved host, I'd love to open it up real quick. If you don't have a microphone, please type it into the chat screen, and I'll be happy to ask any one of our panel members or try to answer the question myself. So I'll open it up to the audience now. No one? We've thrown an hour's worth of stuff, of wonderful stuff at you here. No one? All right. Well, with that, I'll give everybody a couple of minutes. If you have any questions, please type them into the screen here. With that, I would like to send a heartfelt thank you so much to my panel, Dr. Tyler Wood, Dr. Ennis Cole, Jessica, and Dr. Nichols, who could not be with us, but she certainly helped put together a lot of the content for this webinar. It looks like I do have a question come in from Amy. I think the last name is said Rossellini. So let's say, as employers, what can we do to ease this transition for those affected with autism entering the workplace? I think actually, Dr. Tyler Wood, you kind of just touched on that. Maybe you could expound on that, or maybe Dr. Ennis Cole. I'll turn it over to you guys. Let me read the question once more time. As employers, what can we do to ease the transition for those affected with autism entering the workforce?
Well, I'll start out with that. Actually, there is a transition plan that can be developed. And in all parties that are involved in the transition plan, the adult who is on the spectrum, the trainer and the workplace individuals need to sit down and find out specifically what will assist the individual on the spectrum be successful in the work environment. And it could be, I need a pass when I feel like I can't handle something. I need maybe a safe place to go. I need to know who I can go talk to about a problem. I need, a break every 30 minutes. And we need to figure this plan out before we put anybody into the work situation. And then we don't need to just launch them and leave them there. We need to stick with them for a while and make sure that our plan is going to be effective. It appears that most individuals on the spectrum don't have difficulty necessarily with the job performance itself, because we can certainly train them to do that in a classroom environment. They have more issues with the social environment of the workplace and the social expectations of the workplace. And we need to come up with a plan to deal with those, and it needs to be modified. And if the job description or requirements change, we need to have somebody come back in and renegotiate that plan.
Yeah, so this I got another question just after that one that it's kind of the same question, but there's an interesting portion of this. It says, so the whole question is, this is from John Turner, what are the work requirements for the future workplace, accounting for a growing number of those with on the spectrum, especially organizations that are moving towards shared spaces or open spaces, which can kind of be counterproductive for this population. Any thoughts on that?
I'd like to add to that. I think the physical layout of the spaces and the amount of noise, the lighting, the physical structures, the actual layout has to be a part of that discussion, because as you said, a number of individuals who are on the spectrum have the sensory integration dysfunction. And so the noise and the lights, the smells, the sounds, the amount of crowd, the traffic coming through the area, all of those things need to be considered as well. So in the design of workspaces, we have to be aware that we need to make some modifications sometimes. I think also very clear expectations, skill development, maybe wraparound support. And I agree wholeheartedly with Dr. Wood about the social aspects of the job. Most individuals on the spectrum are very capable of doing the work, but it's the social piece that throws them.
Wonderful. So I believe that comes to the end of our questions. Again, if you have any others, you can type them in for the last few minutes. We'll be on here. Again, I want to thank my panel, Jessica, Dr. Tyler Wood, Dr. Ennis Cole, and Dr. Nichols. Y'all are, I don't think it's very hard to see why I chose these four ladies to help me with this panel. They are all experts and really, really doing some wonderful things to in this field and to help people in this area. People like my son and I personally am very grateful, and also grateful for everybody's time. One last thing here before we get gone. So again, my name is Kerry Romaine. I'm the VP Finance here at ISPI-Texas. Our president, Daryl Harshberger, is also on as well. If you are interested in joining ISPI-Texas, or you would like to ask more questions about this presentation here, please, there's our emails. Mine is kdromine, KDROMINE @gmail.com, or you can email our wonderful president, Daryl, DARYL.HARSHBARGER @nm.com. That's Daryl Harshberger @nm.com. You can also follow ISPI-Texas on our website, where this presentation and the recording of this discussion will be. It's ISPI-TX.org. You can follow us on LinkedIn at ISPI-Texas, TEXAS spelled out. Facebook, Twitter at ISPI-Texas. With that brings us to the end of the discussion, and I really appreciate everybody's attendance. And if you would like to join ISPI or get some more information, you can reach out to us. I really thank everybody for their attendance today, and I think this has been a very worthwhile discussion. So I'll hang around. I'm going to stop the recording now. I think I'm going to stop the recording now.